I'm confident that a major factor in your offending that night was sheer bravado. Felling the tree in the middle of the night and in the middle of the storm gave you some sort of thrill, as did the media coverage of your crimes over the following days. You revelled in the coverage, taking evident pride in what you had done, knowing that you were responsible for the crime which so many people were talking about.
So that was Judge Mrs. Justice Lambert shortly before she handed down sentences to Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers for cutting down the Sycamore Gap tree. Tom, I have to say, when I first saw the sentence, I thought, well, it's a bit harsh to just chop down a tree. I'm also aware that there'll be people watching this thinking it's not harsh enough. It was kind of a senseless, moronic thing to do, causing pain for absolutely no reason to lots of people who love it. My first question is, how does a judge reach a conclusion on how much of a sentence to give to people who chop down a tree?
Well, yeah, Dan, it's interesting. There'd been a lot of talk in the build-up to this of them potentially getting, up to 10 years in jail. In the end, 4 years and 3 months was what they got. What you reflect there is absolutely the case. There are split views on this. There are plenty of people who think, this was just a tree. Why are two guys going to jail for more than 4 years for it? Equally, and I can say this, as somebody who'd been to the tree lots of times and has been to the stump lots of times since, this was a place that people loved. Not just for its appearance in the Robin Hood film, not just because it was really photogenic, but it felt like a special place for lots of people. And the judge really did take that into account. So essentially there are sentencing guidelines. There is a upper kind of theoretical limit of about 4 years for criminal damage. Now, she went above that, and the reason that she went above that was kind of for two reasons, really. Firstly, she said it sat right at the top of that limit because it was such a special place that so many people loved. She referred to the outpouring of love and grief, frankly, that we saw in the immediate aftermath of the crime, on social media, in the media. The National Trust, who owned the tree, had a deluge, thousands and thousands of people getting in touch to tell them how much they loved the tree.
Well, let me interrupt you there, Tom, for a second, because we heard from the judge on that. Let's take a listen to what the judge said about that before you carry on.
For those who live in Northumberland or who love this county, the tree had become a landmark, a symbol of the beauty of its untamed landscape, featuring prominently in local art and local tourism. For others, the tree had become a place of special personal significance, where marriages were proposed and personal tributes to loved ones were left.
And so based on that, Tom, what was the reaction inside court, first from Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers?
So, we didn't get a lot of reaction from them, if I'm honest. They sat all the way through today's hearing, which ran, before the judge's sentencing remarks as well. There was legal argument, and all the way through, they both sat and stared straight ahead. There had been some suggestions, some concern that because they've fallen out since they did this, they were best friends. They're now definitely not that. They blamed each other for the crime, and there was some suggestion that there might be a fracas in the dock. In the end, though, there wasn't. They both stared straight ahead, emotionless, really, all the way through the process today. The only hint of any disagreement between the pair, the fact that Adam Carruthers was taken down to the cells first, and when he was, they kept Daniel Graham back in the dock, presumably to make sure that the pair didn't meet at any point on their journey from here at Newcastle Crown Court to prison, where they're going to be spending the next couple of years.
Probably the most jaw-dropping moment of the whole case was the footage that was shown in court, the footage taken on Daniel Graham's phone of the moment the tree was actually felled. Talk us through the reaction in the room when that footage was showed in court.
Well, that was fascinating because we, in the press pack, we had a hint and had a hint for several months that this video existed, but none of us knew for sure until the opening day of the trial that it definitely did. There'd been lots of suggestions of grainy mobile phone footage, but nothing concrete to suggest that it definitely was something that existed. Then we knew it existed, but it wasn't played straight away. But we knew that at the moment that this was sent out into the wider world, it was going to be huge. This was a crime which, had shocked the world. It had made headlines all around the world. And the fact that this video existed was shocking enough. The fact it was going to be given for the world to see was incredible. And it was like being at the weirdest movie premiere I've ever seen. Everybody in court who hadn't been intimately involved in the case, who wasn't a barrister or the judge or the defendants, were glued to the screen. You couldn't hear a breath, you couldn't hear a pin drop. All you could hear was the sound of that chainsaw. And then the moment the tree falls and you see it and it's shocking, but you hear it, and it's the sound that everybody I've spoken to that really seems to shock people. And hearing that and knowing that we were the first people to see this, and that this was going to become one of the defining images of the year was just an incredible moment. And I think for the jury, who are of course the people who mattered at that point, from that point on it was cut and dry.
I think one of the most remarkable things about the case is not just the fact we had this video footage of the tree actually falling, but you also then have these remarkable, now infamous voice notes between Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers, which basically sealed their fate, didn't it? And let's take a listen to them, because they are actually brilliant, these voice notes.
News. I think it's going to go wild.
It's gone viral. It is worldwide. It will be on ITV News tonight.
Lucky souls, on ITV News tonight. Tommy, we're any closer to knowing why they actually did this? Was it just to be on the news, on ITV News? I mean, don't blame them, but...
Well, you know what? You heard from the judge a little earlier. She referred to that, didn't she? The thrill of felling the tree in the middle of the night, but also of seeing that media coverage. There's been lots of suggestions about why they did it. In court today, Adam Carruthers' barrister tried to suggest it was just an act of drunken stupidity, that he'd been drinking was essentially out of control. Now, the judge dismissed that out of hand. She said, you look at how clean that cut was, what a professional job you did. Somebody who was drunk just couldn't have done that. So, it wasn't just a drunken moment. There were suggestions that, Adam Carruthers, he recently had a newborn daughter, that perhaps it was a trophy to celebrate her birth. That was one of the things the prosecution suggested. Daniel Graham, he lived just a few hundred yards from Hadrian's Wall, but a long way away from Sycamore Gap. There had been suggestions that it was a planning row. He'd been told that he couldn't stay living on the compound that he owned. He lived in a static caravan. He didn't have planning permission. Was it a revenge for being told that he wasn't going to be allowed to stay there? I think, frankly, the explanation is pretty simple. It's a pretty stupid explanation as well. These were just two guys who thought they were having a laugh. They thought this was going to be funny. They definitely didn't think it was going to land them in jail.
No, and they probably didn't allow for it being on the news, as they said, but also not just here in the UK, but also around the world. You mentioned earlier, it kind of went everywhere, this story. What do you think it is about this tree? And I come back to it. It is a tree. It has a lot of personal memories and significance for people. But talk us through, you said you've been there a lot covering this story. What is it about it? I've never been. So paint a picture for me of why this place for so many people is so special.
So the visuals, first of all, right? There's a road goes straight past where the tree stands, but half a mile from it, and you see the gap that it stands in from the road. It's called the Military Road. It's the old Roman road that runs parallel with Hadrian's Wall, and just from the road, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to walk there. You can see it in this incredible kind of vista. But actually, there's more to it than that. So, I've spoken for the documentary, we've spoken to people for whom the tree was really special. A couple who got engaged there. They have this beautiful photograph of the pair of them with him down on one knee asking her to marry him. And, for them, this was a place that they went back every year. And they planned to go back every year, with their kids, with their grandkids, and they couldn't. I've spoken to people who've scattered the ashes of relatives there, and there's something really special about it. I before it was felled. I'd been there a couple of times myself. I live locally. And we used to go, I've got a little boy, he's 8 years old now, but when he was smaller as well. And we'd walk up there, and as you drop down, it's along Hadrian's Wall, you see it kind of come below you, and it was sadly just a really imposing sight. But then you get under it, and I'd always run ahead from a little boy, and I'd hide a chocolate bar, and it was the magic treat to us, and that for me has always been like, that's a tiny story, right? It's nothing, but for me it really meant something, and I think there's so many countless people who'd been there for whom it meant that, and then people who hadn't been there, who'd just seen the pictures, enjoyed the pictures, and couldn't comprehend why somebody would take something like that away. And I think, just to go back to court today, there was a really interesting moment where Adam Carruthers, barrister, this was part of the defence argument, interestingly, but drew an analogy with Just Stop Oil protesters trying to destroy a Van Gogh. And I think actually, I've talked to barristers about this in the lead up to the sentencing as well, and that's the closest analogy you can get. Although this was a natural thing, the closest kind of sensible analogy is to a priceless work of art, and that's what they've taken away from people. And it is something that has left so many people so sad. And I absolutely understand people who make the argument that it was just a tree, but there are so many people for whom it was so much more than that. And I think for a lot of those, seeing this sentence today will be a really, really important moment.
Tom, really appreciate it, and beautiful descriptions there of the tree and your memories of it yourself. Thank you so much for your time, Tom. Tom's going to rush off and actually finish the documentary because it's not actually finished yet. So make sure you listen. Make sure you watch Tom's
back
documentary.
Into the edit suite.
Make sure you watch Tom's documentary when he's finished it. Sycamore Gap, Britain's Lost Landmark, is on ITV1 tonight, which is Tuesday, and you can catch up on ITVX. Don't forget, you can follow What You Need to Know on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts on podcast apps, so you make sure you never miss an episode. But until our next briefing, thank you very much for joining us.